Good morning, fourth grade. Today we're going to continue reading in our Civil War text, and we are in the section entitled, there it is, Recruiting and Training. And so before you get started, we have a quick write for you. It says, what do sports teams do in order to win games? What does the coach do to help the team win? Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the focus question. Our focus question for today is, what is the main idea of the text? And remember, we're going to be using our how or why question strategy to help us find the main idea. Our vocabulary words for today are militia. That is a military force or group made up of regular people, and they are for like emergencies. So you would draw a line to this picture because these look like everyday soldiers. And then the next word is regiment, and that is what you would call a group of soldiers. So soldiers in the army are divided up into groups, and the name of those groups are called regiments. So this would be an example of a regiment right here. And then the last word is maneuver, and that is when the military, that's like what they do in a battle. They maneuver, they like attack. And so this is an example of a military maneuver. You can see the soldiers moving into place to attack. Turn the page, and we are reading in our text about the recruiting and training of soldiers. And so we would want to ask a how or why question about the title. And in box 1, we would write down, why was recruiting and training important for the rebel army? Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to read. Remember, we're going to underline our answer to the question. In 1775, many Americans were members of militia companies, mainly social clubs that met a couple of times a year on training days. When the revolution started, men turned out with local militia for a short term of service. The states and Congress soon formed regiments that enlisted men for longer terms, teaching them military basics so they could maneuver on the battlefield. Their officers usually learned from drill manuals created for the rebel army. In time, American soldiers were able to stand up against the redcoats and earn their respect. And so when we're thinking about why recruiting and training is important, we know that the soldiers in the rebel army weren't very knowledgeable about fighting, and so they had to go to basically like military school and learn the basics of like being on the battlefield. And because they were able to do this, they had a chance of winning against the British Army. So for our main idea in box 1, we would write down, recruiting and training soldiers was important for the rebel army because it helped the American soldiers stand up against the redcoats and earn their respect. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for box 2. It says, what did the state-formed regiments do to prepare new soldiers for battle? So I'll go back in my text to where I find where they're talking about the state-formed regiments and preparing soldiers for battle. And it says that the states and Congress soon formed regiments that enlisted men for longer terms, teaching them military basics so they could maneuver in the battlefield. Okay, so there's two things that they did. The first thing is that they made them stay at military school longer. And that was so that they could teach them more about the basics of being a soldier on the battlefield. So in 2A, we would write, the regiments enlisted men for longer terms. and taught them military tactics. The officers used drill manuals to teach the soldiers. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for 2B. It says, why would this benefit the rebel army? So if they're enlisting for longer periods of time, that means that they can gain more experience and they have more opportunity to practice so that they can get better. And then when you're actually teaching the soldiers what happens on the battlefield and what to do in certain situations, when the time comes for them to actually do it, they're going to be more successful. So in box 2, we would write down the fact that the men were enlisted for longer terms meant that they would gain more experience. Teaching the soldiers military tactics would help the soldiers to maneuver on the battlefield. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for box 3. It says, what does the phrase social clubs mean in the first sentence? So if we go back, it says, in 1775, many Americans were members of militia companies, mainly social clubs, that met a couple of times a year on training days. So the militia companies were more like social clubs. So instead of actually meeting and doing serious training, instead they all got together to like talk and catch up and gossip, instead of actually learning how to be better soldiers. And so in box 3, we would write down the phrase social clubs means that before the Revolution, the American Army was not serious. People who were in the Army met up rarely, and it was a social group that did not focus on fighting techniques. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for 3B. It says, why did the states and Congress create regiments? We go back in our text. We know that they are creating regiments. If you go down to this last sentence, Congress is creating these regiments because they're preparing for war. They need these regiments because they need to be able to stand up against the British Army. So in box 2B, we will write down, the British Army was known for being impressive. So the American states and Congress knew that they needed serious soldiers who were well trained if they were going to win the war. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for box 4. And in box 4, we're going to turn the page to this picture and caption that says handling a musket. And I'm going to read the caption. As the American Army developed, manuals were created to teach soldiers. This manual showed the steps of using a musket. In battle, soldiers stood in ranks, firing and reloading together on command. So they all stood in a straight line and they took turns firing at each other until people surrendered. Which is, we would think sounds crazy, but that's how they did it back then. All right, so in 4A it says, what were the manuals for soldiers? And we know that the soldiers had manuals in order to teach them how to do certain things like hold a musket. And it even gave them pictures or visuals that would help their understanding. So in box 4A, we would write, manuals were created to teach soldiers how to do different things, like hold a musket. They gave visuals to help soldiers understand what to do. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for 4B. It says, what was the result of the recruiting and training of American soldiers? So if we go back in the text, we know that they are one of the results is that they were ready for battle and that they earned the respect of the British soldiers. In our text it says, in time, American soldiers were able to stand up against the redcoats and earn their respect. So in 4B, we would write, the recruiting and training of American soldiers helped prepare American soldiers for battle. This led them to be able to fight seriously against the redcoats and gain the respect of their opponents. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the paragraph. It says, why was recruiting and training soldiers important for the American Army? And so you can use your main idea from box 1 as your topic sentence, and then you'll need a quote from the text and to be able to explain your answer.